Hi, I'm Jonathan J. On this video, I'm interviewing Nathan Winch, a professional business buyer. He's 32 years old, and you will discover how he's bought millions of pounds worth of businesses in the last few years alone. Now, if you're serious about buying a business, in the video description below this YouTube video, there is a link to a brand new free training program, no cost whatsoever. If you watch that training program, it will give you the essentials of business buying. And if you love this type of video, then like the video, subscribe to the channel and click the notifications bell, and you will receive a notification the next time I release a brand new video on buying a business. So Nathan, you started off as a biologist. So help me out here. How did you go from being a biologist to an acquisitions entrepreneur?
God, we're going back quite a long time now. So when I studied molecular biology at university in Huddersfield. And as part of my gap year, I sort of worked in the NHS in research and development. And part of what I did for my department was I purchased things. So I was on the purchasing side as well. So I used to buy things like cleaning consumables, wipes, that sort of thing, as just for the lab and stuff like that. And I noticed that everything was incredibly expensive. So this is probably 16, 17 years ago, something like that. I'd buy something and realise that, there's a big monopoly here for companies that are supplying the NHS. So one of the things that happened was I think I was buying a fork or something silly, and it was like £4 or something, and I was thinking, this is outrageous. So I started looking into it, and actually there were no smaller companies on NHS frameworks, so agreements to supply the NHS. And I thought, well, how hard can it be? So I sort of went off, knew the lingo. I'd worked there, obviously, a little bit as part of my sandwich year at uni. And I bid on an NHS contract and I won it. So this was me at university, my final year, won a share of a £39 million NHS contract. Didn't have any money, Jonathan. I was a student. So I had to scramble around looking for investors, people that could help me. Obviously, I knew the product and the technical aspect of the product, but that's where it ended. So sort of scrambled around to find investors, did that, got some people on board that had worked in the NHS as non-execs, and fast forward a few more years and I ended up selling that business to a chemical supplier who wanted to get into the NHS and vertically integrate. And then I thought, this is good, and realised that the money was in selling the business. More money in selling the business than the whole
than actually
5 years of operating the business.
It's funny you should say that, because my very first business, 2.5 years of operating it, made more money when I sold it in those 2.5 years. Lesson learned very quickly. And you also joined the long list of entrepreneurs who started their business out of their university dorm room, as they say in the States, but halls of residence here in the UK. I'm thinking of Michael Dell as a very famous one with Dell Computing. So that was your first taste of business and what it could do for you. So that was like a 5-year sprint, that part of it. What happened next?
So I thought, well, this is good. I'll try this again. So started another business, won an NHS contract because I thought maybe this is where the value is, and then sold that business with not much trading but the contract, and realised, right, this is where I need to be. Not as much money that time because it literally was just a contract. Sold it to some stakeholders I was working with at the time, and then sort of did a bit of consulting for some of the companies I'd worked with, and then realised this is a bit boring. So fast forward another couple of years, and I thought, well, hang on a minute, I've got the resources. Maybe I should start to invest. So I invested in a few startup businesses. Probably invested about 150k before I realised this is very slow. The returns are sort of not there. This is a very extrapolated thing that I'm working with. So I thought, well, what about acquiring businesses? Surely I don't have the resources for that. So speaking to some of the lenders I'd worked with in the past, turns out that it was possible, as you'll know. And so started doing that on a very small scale. So buying companies that were 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 pound turnover, and then quickly sort of added value to them in order to be able to then sell them. So either a buyout of whoever's working in the business after I'd bought it, or some sort of trade sale or integration with somebody else. And then realize, this is really cut down the amount of time it takes to invest and then produce a realisable return
Yes.
in a period that makes sense
Compared to a startup.
compared to investing in a startup or starting something myself. So started doing that a little bit more. The pace of deal making sort of increased. Took on more built a deal team over the 18 months after that. All kind of coming up to today. So last year, I think we spent about £8 million on acquisitions, a gross value of business purchases. Some of which we've exited, some which have gone very well, some which have not gone so very well. And that's basically all we do now is we buy and sell businesses. So we're kind of like a quasi private equity firm where I'm the only investor. So that's how we kind of present ourselves. And we're doing very well. So I think we employ about 100 people now across
Fantastic.
the UK. So it's
And that's
pretty
100
good
people in the businesses.
in the businesses that we've acquired.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's great. And you're saving jobs, creating new jobs along the way as well. So let's talk about some of those deals. So maybe you could pick out a couple that would be the most interesting to our viewers and listeners.
Interesting. So one of the first businesses we bought was a consumables business, so similar to the one that I sold right at the start. So I thought I'll get back into the area that I know quite well. So we bought that for a very low purchase price. I think it was like £200,000 turnover, and I think we paid about £80,000 for the business. So we try and obviously conserve our resources, so we try and put as little equity into the deal as possible, which makes sense. That's what everybody does. And that one was particular, albeit a small deal, it was particularly good. So I think there must have been about £10,000 of equity that went into that deal, which subsequently over the following sort of month or two we gained back through the profits of the business.
Let me just say that differently, just so that everyone is very, very clear in what you did here. So business, £200,000 of annual revenue. You effectively bought it you did buy it with £10,000 of your own money, but then you were able to get that money back out. So it was a sort of a cash neutral
That's right,
investment.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah, within about a month. The rest of the purchase price was made up of a little bit of cash at bank and some asset finance. So obviously increasing our return on investment, which is what you do. Another good deal, which was particularly large, was a acquisition in the Northeast. So we bought a warehousing and distribution company. We spent £5.5 million on that acquisition. And I think the equity into that deal was probably around 200,000. So, which was also made up of paying for the fees of lawyers and legals and things like that, stamp duty. So that was a good deal, funded mainly through a freehold property, which was in the business. Again, a bit of asset finance, being careful not to over leverage. And again, within a short order, we earned back the money that we put into the deal originally. So over that time, built up some very good relationships with tertiary lenders and now a couple of private backers that I've got. So those were the two noteworthy deals which were particularly good financially for us, as well as the ease of doing the deal. So those were great deals.
What are your criteria in terms of sector, size, location?
So our criteria now, we've sort of sharpened our criteria, become more focused. So we look at the transport and infrastructure sectors, so things like warehousing, distribution, commercial property, haulage, anything to do with infrastructure and moving things around, basically.
Okay.
So we're focused on that sector currently.
So I've got some clients in my groups that are doing exactly that. So I know a little bit about that sector, which is a great sector, by the way, great sectors. So what are the characteristics of the sellers in those sectors? Are you looking for a particular type of seller? If you're curious about buying a business, if you are wondering whether it's something that you could do, then I've put together a brand new training that's going to be absolutely perfect for you. There is a link in the video description below. Click the link, watch the training, and find out whether buying a business is something that you could do. And if you like this type of video, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the notifications bell, and you will receive a notification every time I release a new video on buying a business.
Not necessarily, although sort of 99% of the sellers we've worked with, it's been retirement sales.
Yeah.
So which typically is the norm. Nothing that we've bought has been up for sale, so we don't use business brokers. We have our own internal comms that we do to lead generation effectively. So I've got a full-time team that just do that, that propagate deals. And like I say, it's always been retirement sales. So we've actually built custom software to target. So in answer to your question, yes, we target directors that are looking to retire. So certain age ranges, demographics, sometimes geography, if it makes sense, because obviously the idea is to buy things to fold into existing empire. So geographically, that's important for us.
Yeah, a 500-mile distance might not always be the most
Wouldn't
convenient.
make sense. That's right. Yeah. So we tend to look for things that are strategic now.
Okay.
Now
that sounds good. That sounds really good. So we both share a reticence around using brokers, and I always say to people, for your first deal, you never use a broker because they are going to outmaneuver you. They have more experience than you. They will out-negotiate you. They know the process better than you know the process because you're just starting out. Later, when you've got more experience, maybe it adds to your deal flow, especially if the broker comes to you. But the majority of the people that I work with are doing exactly what you're doing, which is going out to the vendor directly rather than using an intermediary. So what are the clear advantages to you of doing that?
Well, I think you control the narrative. I think that's important. We obviously display our credibility, so it's not the credibility of a broker. I often use the phrase that brokers tend to be the graveyard of selling businesses. I know that's quite extreme, but if you look into a lot of business brokers' success rates, they're in the single-digit percentages of actual sales and completions that they do. So that was another reason. Often overinflated ideas of value through business brokers. So like estate agents, if I'm a business broker, I want to win your business, Jonathan. So I'm going to say your business is worth 10 million. I can sell it for 10 million. You pay me an exorbitant listing fee. I put it out there and I'm like, well, actually, Jonathan, people are willing only really to pay 8 million for this business, when they knew all along that people were only willing to pay 8 million for this business. And often an advantage for us as well is with retirement sales, people tend to have a figure in their head that they want to retire with that is just completely detached from the value of the business anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's how much do they need to pay off the mortgage, buy the holiday home,
Exactly.
And buy the new car, and buy presents for everyone.
That's right. That's right. So that figure wonderfully, obviously in all the cases where we execute a purchase, wonderfully kind of matches with what we believe the business is worth. So that's another advantage of going direct.
Yes.
And all the communications direct. So all the guys that are on my team with the experience, they can, build a rapport with the seller. It's not through somebody else, and obviously the broker works for the seller, so they want to get as much money as possible and we want to pay as little as possible. So oftentimes I find the easiest way and the most effective way is to have the seller build ownership around what that figure is. So work with them to come up with that, or at least me show them how I've gotten to that figure, so they're happy with it.
So
and
it's a collaborative process. As
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
got to be. Yeah.
Here's the deal. Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Now, to pick up on something you said earlier, which makes a lot of sense, is you want to make the very best use of your resources and therefore minimize your cash into the deal. And I think any sensible business person would want to do the same. Yeah. Why put in 100,000 where you could put in 10? I mean, there's really no comparison, is there? But there's always someone who says, well, that's absolutely outrageous. How dare you try and buy that business without putting your own money into the deal? You need to put your house on the line, Nathan, in order to buy that business. And some people are very vocal about this. I mean, I've been trolled consistently by people who feel that you as the buyer should adopt so much risk. What are your feelings about that?
I obviously look at it from my perspective, uh, obviously. So us as a business, I need to protect my business, my employees, our future, and the sustainability of the business. So, like you say, resource management and allocation is really important. I think it's important to see it from both sides, so I understand. I mean, I have had personal guarantees on purchases before. I'm not going to say that I haven't. And there's been deals where we've put more equity in than I'd liked, but I like to think we've got a suite of lenders now that we work with that understand what we do, most importantly, and are willing to help us. And oftentimes it's not happened to me a great deal, but sometimes you'll have sellers that don't like that as well. So they'll say, "Well, hang on a minute, you're paying for the business with the assets in the business."
Yeah,
Well,
you're buying the business with my own money.
yes, but it's the same as buying a house, right? Isn't it? You're paying with the house that you don't yet own. You're getting a mortgage on
Using
that house that you
using
don't
the
yet
house as
own
the collateral on the loan.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just in this
And
situation.
no one complains then.
No one
Be-
complains
because
no.
really, if you're selling your house and you get the money that you want for your house, does it really matter where the money comes from? Just like when you're selling a business, who cares where the money comes from? You can still spend it regardless of its source.
Exactly, yeah. Plus, in the situation of a business, obviously there'll be sometimes some earnouts, some deferred payments, which obviously saves capital. Being obviously responsible with that, of course, making sure the business can take on the added stress of acquisition debt or acquisition finance. But yeah, that's sort of how it works. They're going to be my assets in the short future, so I can borrow off that in order to buy it. It's the same as anything else. And obviously, there are parts in there with warranties and things like that. So I can say, well, I don't want to give you the whole purchase price, because if I do that and something goes wrong, I ain't going to be able to catch you to say, right, give me some money back. So we always hold some back, 20-30% at least, for things like enforcement of warranties and
Because
things
warranty
like that.
claims are very difficult.
Yes, they are.
And expensive.
They are, yes.
Yeah. So always better to have some sort of right of offset
Correct.
as opposed to trying to make a legal claim. So I think we're actually on the same page, aren't we, with our belief about how that should be done. I talk to a lot of people about how larger deals are actually easier than smaller deals. What's your experience?
Well, it's exactly the same, isn't it? So we're spending the same amount of time, the same salaries on the deal team, the same legal fees often, for a deal that's 500,000 as opposed to 5 million. So if I'm looking at a return on investment in terms of a return on spend, the bigger deals are the better investments. And like you say, oftentimes a lot of the lenders we work with, they've got minimum lending anyway.
Of course.
So where I'm saying I want to buy this business for 200,000, well, our minimum lend's $1 million. So why are you not doing bigger deals? So that's kind of where we've progressed. It's been obviously a desire to progress in terms of the size of deal, but also the lending criteria as well.
Yes, and it's a lot easier to get that larger lending than the smaller lending, because it's not worth their while as lenders to do everything that needs to be done to put in a very small amount as a loan. Yeah. So everyone wants to know about the things that don't go right as well as the things that go right. And to be fair, you can often learn a lot more from the things that don't go according to plan than you can from the things that are absolutely textbook. So have you got any war stories
yes
you can share with us?
I do. So I've got a couple of war stories. So I've had acquisitions that have gone wrong, where I've actually been through an insolvency process as well before. So I've seen what happens when it goes wrong, particularly if you over leverage, or if you don't do enough due diligence, or if you don't hold previous sellers to account when things do go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had my fair share of experience with that, particularly with enforcing warranties, which is where offsets are incredibly important. Yes. They really, really are. And the cost of legal fees, I've had PGs called upon, and so I've kind of almost had the works, really.
But this is what makes anyone who they are, isn't
Oh
it?
yeah, of
Is
course it
having
is, yeah.
that well-rounded experience, not just because if it's like every deal is the most amazing deal, you've either not done enough deals,
Yeah. Yeah.
or they're all exactly the same with such low risk, you can't help but be a hero every single
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But the reality of life is, it's just like a landlord. And I speak to lots of property people, and they say, yeah, we built this portfolio, but a couple of them were absolutely duff ones. We had to sell them for less than we bought them for. This one was an absolute nightmare. We didn't do a proper survey. We thought we were getting a bargain. Actually, it turned out to be terrible. So really, if you do enough deals of any description, there are going to be some that work better than others and some that are absolute dogs, and you need to shoot them. I'm not sure if that's a great analogy,
Yeah,
but
put them down.
it's a
Yeah.
terrible. In fact, that's a terrible analogy, and I'll get letters of complaint. But you know what I mean.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's that's where you kind of hone your deal making ability as well. So, like you said, you often learn more from what goes wrong than what just goes right all the time. And don't get me wrong, we've had stellar deals which have put that into perspective.
Exactly.
In fact, so much so that those deals have paid for those deals going wrong. So it swings and roundabouts.
So ahead, you're winning.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
As long as you're winning.
Sorry for interrupting your video, but I wanted to introduce you to a great lawyer in the UK who can get your deals done for you. He's worked for 50 of my mastermind clients in the last few months alone. His name is John Andrews, and I've got his details right here in my little back book of contacts. You can phone him on 0345 241 2494, or you can email him on johnandrews.deallawyer@jmw.co.uk. If you want someone who can get a deal done, he is your guy. So let's get back to the video.
So what tips would you give people, let's say their first acquisition, based upon your experience, the positive and the negative? What sort of tips would you give people?
I think never be too careful on due diligence, obviously, which seems like an obvious one. I'd say getting a bit more technical. I'd say use sort of SPVs quite liberally. So I think in terms of compartmentalizing risk and cross corporate guarantees and whatever else the lender might throw at you, build a group structure that might seem too much for where you are, but actually you can grow into it.
It's interesting how many accountants talk my clients out of doing that.
Yeah,
they say you don't need a layer of SPVs. You've got a holding company. All those accounts will have to file. There's a cost attached to that. And they try and talk my clients out of it. And the client comes to me and says, "What do I do?" I said, "No, go back and tell the accountant that it's your neck on the line here. You need to compartmentalize that risk. You've got to do it this way. Otherwise, you're going to come a cropper at some point."
Well, I mean, a perfect example, I obviously don't want to go into the specifics, but what, extra £500 a year per SPV, something like that?
Exactly.
If there's been a situation where if I'd have had that extra layer, sort of midco or whatever, if you want to call it, that extra £500 a year would have probably saved me about £600,000 in costs later through insolvency. So, it swings and roundabouts. So yeah, there is an extra cost, and I'm very happy to pay it.
I've seen similar situations, absolutely. And no one ever regrets setting up the corporate structure correctly. You can only regret not doing it correctly.
Well, I mean, we had another situation as well. It's not just the accountant. So I was speaking to, obviously, buying businesses, we inherit bank accounts all over the place. I must bank with literally everyone. But I was speaking to one particular bank and I'm saying, well, this business needs an overdraft just to help it through the seasonality. They said, "Oh, we see that you're a director on a number of businesses." I said, "Yeah, I am. I'm an investor." And they said, "Oh, it's something like 30 or something like that." I said, "Well, because we have group structures." And they said, "Oh, well, we don't like that." And I said, "Well, this is a business in isolation. What's the problem?" Anyway, I switched banks, and another bank just did the facility for me. But it's just this. I guess it's quite difficult for you to act like an actual finance house or a private equity firm when you've got all these different stakeholders saying, "Well, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, for this reason and that reason." But actually, in the long run, you absolutely do need it. especially for selling as well. So if you want to break something off and sell it, or there's a buyer that wants this, doesn't want that, if it's laid out correctly, it's very easy and tax efficient as well.
Yeah. So a situation that we've seen on many occasions is where you've got the trading business and you've got the property, the real estate that the trading business operates out of in the same company. And then you've got to demerge it and get the HMRC clearance to do that. And it just adds an extra layer of complexity on the deal,
And
which
expense.
and expense, which no one really needs. And if it had just been set up correctly, and that's usually, in fact, I was talking to another podcast guest earlier about how terrible so many accountants are, and lawyers as well, actually, as it happens. But accountants can give absolutely terrible advice, and everyone trusts their accountant. But I don't think they should. I think if people stopped trusting their accountants and questioned their advice a little bit more, everyone would be better off.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's terrible, more lazy. I think it's, well, we're going to have to do this and do that, and I'm going to have to charge you for it. And actually, you get a good commercial solicitor, they'll do it all for you anyway. But yeah, I think I've got to agree with you there. I think you've got to. I mean, it's why actually the accountant that does all of our books for all of our businesses, I actually own a stake in that accountancy practice. So I invested for that individual to actually come out of her job and start her own practice, because I thought I need somebody close, someone who's a friend, someone who understands what I do and actually is going to be dynamic.
It's working in your best interest.
Exactly. So I actually got into bed with that as well. So that's been an incredible boon as well.
So actually being a stakeholder in that business or a shareholder in that business gives you a certain leverage, doesn't it? And she's not going to mess you around as you are also a partner in the business.
That's right. Yeah. So that's been an incredible help. So yeah, we just try and sort of vertically integrate, try and consolidate all the nice buzzwords. We do it all to build sort of a group or groups of companies that we then look to sell. So that's what we do, and having these stakeholders is really important. I know you talk about deal team, and that's all my deal team now are salaried. They're all full time. And that's how you get the best information. That's how you get the best deals, do the best work. It's just quite important to me.
So what we'll do a second podcast video interview where we'll talk about consolidation, building to exit, and all of those things, shall we? Let's do that soon. So give us some more tips then, some more acquisition tips, things that you've picked up that you can only know if you actually do this sort of thing. Lots of theorists out there, but people like you and I who've done it, only people like us would know.
Systems, processes. I think when you, in the first sort of 40, 50 days of purchasing a business, the first couple of months, you need to get acquainted with the systems. In fact, there's a lot of stuff you should probably do pre-transaction. Like, for example, some simple things that have caught me out in the past where just not being able to access my own bank account, and it's still the previous owners who are now in Spain and I can't contact them. So I think really nitty-gritty, granular minutiae of the deal is important because the devil's in the detail. So I think things like that, getting your processes right, visiting the business, getting under the skin of the business, meet everyone, get all the keys. I think the little things are what trip you up, especially when you've got this grand vision as an entrepreneur. People do, but they don't think about the detail, and I think that's quite important. You need to be able to get into the premises and things like that.
I've had situations where, I made it a rule that I always change the locks, and then you forget your own rules, don't you? Yeah. And it's just hassle, and it's just, do we really need to change it? And the locksmith's quoting a huge amount of money because it's a special type of door or lock or something, and you don't do it. But I've had situations where the seller who is exited completely is letting themselves in at the weekend. Is that not sort of, that's a little bit freaky?
I've had that. And I've had sellers come in at the weekend and actually take stuff they thought was theirs.
Of course.
And I've caught them on their own security cameras and said, well, hang on a minute, is that lawnmower yours?
So we had someone go in and take the office computers.
Really?
And it's like, they say, oh, it's my computer. No. You've sold the business. You can't take the computers out because without the computers, we can't operate the business.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's really funny. We've had all sorts of stuff. Yeah, it's the post-transaction stuff, I think, that can trip most people up, especially people that haven't done it before. So the business owners that have only ever run their business and they're buying another competitor for the first time or something, that's usually what I think trips people up in my experience. So
in which case, let's do an entire podcast episode all about that, because I think that's going to be a really interesting subject. So to conclude this part one, what advice would you give to someone who's been thinking about buying a business for a while? They're looking at starting a business. Maybe they want to leave their corporate life and buy a business, and they haven't taken that first step. What would you say to the person who's just sitting on the fence?
I think get some good advice. Don't just trust anybody you speak to, like with the accountants. And I think, I just think take the leap. So long as you manage your risk correctly, it can be really life-changing, I think, actually, for business owners as well, not just for people that want to quit the corporate life. I think business owners that want to grow inorganically, I think it can be really game-changing for their business, so why not? I mean, just read a book or, watch a video or something and just clue yourself up and just do it. Just contact people.
Nathan, thank you so much for your time.
No worries.
And I'll see you in part 2.